Welcome to Tea Time, Conscious Conversation and Organic Tea. I'm Harmony Fronterhouse, and my guest today is Neil Guar. Neil is the founder of Portal to Ascension, a conscious event production company created in 2008 that hosts a wide range of presenters on a variety of topics such as the origins of humanity, the existence of extraterrestrial life, exposing hidden truths, and exploring the nature of reality. He travels the world with his wife Soul, facilitating gatherings and filming documentaries that are intended to empower the individual to reclaim their sovereignty and awaken to their full potential. Neil also operates an online platform that creates and facilitates about 110 conferences and workshops a year. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Neil is a philosopher, historian, researcher, and spoken word artist. He represents his research on the ancient wisdom and future science of sound, vibration, and frequency, as well as in-depth explorations into ancient civilizations, archaeological discoveries, space anomalies, shedding light on hidden esoteric wisdom, and exploring ways in which we can create unity and peace on earth. And I totally resonate with all of the amazing points that come up in your bio. And, that's one of the reasons why I had you on the show today, is because of who you are and what you've been doing for the past, 10, 20 years. And, you're really a pioneer in the ascension and the exploration of consciousness and expansion of consciousness. And really, I've been following your work for years, and I'm just really excited to have you on the show. So thank you so much, Neil, for joining me today and spending time on Tea Time.
Thank you so much, Harmony. It's really nice to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm really excited about our conversation. But first, we're going to talk about our tea. And you chose to have some mint tea. And that is one of my favorite teas. It's actually one of the very first teas that I like blended together, is what I'm drinking today. I call Refreshment. And it's chocolate mint, peppermint, and spearmint with some raspberry leaf. And I really
Wow.
just love the way that it blends together. And it's so delicious. Really, really uplifting, refreshing, and it helps my digestion as well. And in this really hot weather that we're having up here in Washington, it's really, really nice to drink some iced peppermint tea. And it's just really just a great way to refresh and feel uplifted. So I would love to hear some of the reasons why you chose to share a cup of peppermint tea today.
Well, I definitely also did it because of the digestive reality of that. So I've always liked mint tea because of its digestive properties, but also because it's a stimulant. It wakes you up, right? So during the day, if you don't want to drink another cup of coffee or you don't want to have coffee at all, it's a good natural stimulant to have the mint. It gives me a second whim, and it also makes me feel like refreshed and opens up my sinuses. All of that. So for me, since I do a lot of presentations and talk a lot and like to do music, mint is a good way to keep alert and then also to feel more able to breathe.
Yeah, great points that you made there. Yeah, it really does help keep you alert and that opening sensation of your airways. And it's just a great overall tea. And, no matter what age you are, if as long as you don't have an allergy to peppermint itself or mint itself, any age can drink it. It's super safe. A
Mhm.
really, really good herb to grow in your garden, because if you put it in the ground, it's going to spread like crazy. It'll come back year after year. And if you want to maintain it, put it in a pot for sure. It's
Mhm.
one of my favorite things to grow, and I grow my tea myself, and I really love peppermint and spearmint and chocolate mint, all the mints. So thank you so much for choosing mint tea today, because that is one of my favorites.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wonderful. So today we're going to get into some awesome topics with Neil. And he is, like I said, the founder of Portal to Ascension. And I would love for you to kind of go into anything about Portal to Ascension that you would like to speak about before we go into our topic.
Yeah, sure. So let me tell. So I guess I'll tell everybody what Portal to Ascension is to kind of begin. Well, to give a summary, I was born and raised in England. I moved to the U.S. when I was 12 years old, and not until I had kind of universal concept like thoughts, like who are we, where do we come from, but nothing really distinct in order to get me to this awareness until I turned 18. When I turned 18 in 2001, I started delving deep into all these topics, and it was a years, like 8 years of solid research on everything that I could really just like put within my reality that could help me understand how humanity came to the position it is now. Like I started doing a lot of research in regards to that, but I wanted to know the root of all religion, like where we all came from. And I think that probably stemmed from just being born and raised in Hinduism, but realizing I wasn't really religious and not knowing if I believed in God. So I wanted to see where everything came from. And I started researching ancient history to try to figure out if there was some sort of commonality, some sort of similarity, maybe an original religion, maybe an original civilization that we all came from. Because if we all came from a select amount of Homo sapiens, right? And then obviously there's more now. We have some sort of relation going on. So what is that? So as I started exploring that, I started getting into all types of information in regards to ancient civilizations. You know, Atlantis definitely came later along the line, but the first ones were civilizations that have even been accepted by the mainstream that existed, what such as the Sumerian civilization. And after going into that text and diving into the Sumerian tablets of creation and expanding that out, and also understanding bloodlines, the ancient elite that were on the planet, how they've maintained control over thousands of
Yeah.
years. That is what created the playing ground, if you will, for me to do sort of research in regards to what these topics mean. So I created a Facebook group called 2012 Consciousness, Mind Evolution, and Presence in 2006. By 2008, it morphed to Portal to Ascension, and the intention for the group was to give people a place to go and just express and talk about this information on Facebook so that I could learn from them and I could build community. And my friends list went from like hundreds of people to 5,000 people in like a year because I just started adding everybody, right? And I just had this huge community of people that I was connected to and sharing a lot of information, going to conferences, retreats, and all those things. And then in 2008, Portal to Ascension was born, and I started doing meditation events, sound healing events that soon went into all day ancient alien events by 2009, along the topics of everything I was learning and discovering. I'd already spent 8 years in this information. Now I felt like I was more grounded in it. I could share it. And in those 8 years, I connected with so many speakers and other researchers that I started calling on them to be a part of Portal to Ascension. You know, and the story, that's really just the beginning of where I started. So I'm just taking you up to that point. But from that moment onwards is when that was kind of the first milestone in the evolution of what we became. And since 2008, it's really been growing. And we've had maybe two other milestones. One, which was in 2012, where we did two large conferences. And then again, around 6 or 7 years ago in 2015, where we moved everything online and cultivated the online university that we currently have. And at this point, we're a full on conscious event production company. Not only do we do a lot of our own events, like over 100 events a year, but we also offer services for many conscious presenters, conferences, people that want to do retreats to ancient sites. So it's what I kind of used to say. It's a service that many speakers didn't even know they needed. You know what I mean? So people could do what they want to do and enjoy it and have fun with it while someone else handles the logistics of everything so that the presenters could focus on the creativity. That's kind of what really inspired what it is now.
Wow, that is so brilliant. I'm just so thankful for all that you've poured into that project and the other projects that you've done as well. I mean, it's part of that evolutionary process of like really like stepping into being the change that we want to see in the world, you know. And I really, you
Hmm.
know, applaud you for that. And I just
Thank
am
you.
so thankful that all these presenters and all these different conscious people have this platform to interface this different information. It's really exciting what you do. And some of the topics that you speak about are, you know, mind blowing. I absolutely love diving deep into this kind of stuff and really exploring all the possibilities and being open minded and having other people that are open minded that really want to speak about this kind of stuff too is just really exciting. And it's like that affirmation that you get, you know, when you on this journey alone for so many years and then you're like, oh wow, there's other people, you know.
Hmm.
It's just a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And I love that you go into human ancestry and, you know, the creation story, the seed races, and, you know, how we are all interconnected in this story. And I would love for you to go into some of that topic of, the root races and how we are all interconnected. What are some of the ways that you connected to that in your first beginning stories?
All right. So when I first started getting into it, as I said, I got into the Sumerian scriptures, right? And I was listening to Jordan Maxwell and a few other individuals talking about the sons of God, right? The sons of God. We hear that in the Bible. The sons of
Right.
God, they got with, they mated with the daughters of men, creating the offspring, creating the Nephilim. That's like straight up biblical stuff right there. But there's all this information about the sons of God that went back into a text that was even further, even more ancient, and it went back as far as the Sumerian scriptures in the tablets of creation, and probably even beyond that if we could track that down as well. And within these texts, a lot of stories that have been taken from all over the world, including into India, into Vedic texts, including into Greek texts, Egyptian,
Yeah.
Christian, Hebrew, Israeli, right? I mean, Jewish, sorry. Like all of that had components that was from this original source text. So that was one of the smoking guns right there. I was like, okay, so a lot of different religions are pulling from this text, and this text could be pulling from somewhere else. Who knows at this
Yeah.
point? And if that's the case, what is this original text talking about? Because either these other ones are just like trying to mimic something that was from before, or both of these things are completely invalid and just mythology. So when I started looking into it, then you immediately get into this whole star being thing where they're talking about these beings that weren't from the planet. They come from another planet within our solar system, right? Called Nibiru, and most people know this story. Whether you believe the Anunnaki story or not, because there's a lot of mistranslations and people have their kind of questions in regards to Zachariah Sitchin and his credibility as well. Whether you believe that or not, the one thing you can take from the Sumerian scriptures is that they are talking about star beings and some beings from another planet and how they got here. And they also have things that are pretty amazing, like a two scale map of our solar system with all the planets in the exact places that we now know the planets are in.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Right.
Dogon tribe as well. That stuff really
Exactly.
fascinates me. And that was one of my eye openers as well.
Yeah. So the Sumerian thing was the first thing, and then I started like bridging out and after that, and I realized in the Dogon tribe, I started looking at the Mahabharata, which is the Hindu epic in which the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu Bible, is just like one chapter in this huge epic. When you think of Hinduism and Vedic knowledge, a lot of people think spirituality. Those mantras and everything have been completely embedded into spiritual awareness and disclosure even, right? But it's funny that the entire concept of the Vedic awareness comes from an epic battle that took place on Earth of the duality. It's a very dualistic thing, and that goes into a whole thing of how India is a manifestation of that duality. Because if you go there, you'll see that as well.
Mhm.
But to get back to the story, so when I was realizing all these star beings, and I would get the Quran, I would have the Bible, I would have Kabbalic texts, I'd have the Sumerian scriptures. I'd be at Panera Bread 2003, 4, 5 with my friend, highlighting areas that were the same. And so my whole thing was either because so let's just say Christianity, for example, the religion that's permeated and seems to be the most predominant, controlling, powerful religion in the world. But there's evidence to suggest that the text that it pulled from came from beings that talk about star beings. Even the Epic of Gilgamesh, Noah's flood, right? So, and then all these other civilizations talking about flood stories, and those flood stories almost always connect to some sort of star thing, like or some sort of spacecraft, even, or some sort of star beings or celestial beings. So either the religion that controls almost the entire world right now is complete BS, or it's pulling from another text and they're actually talking about ETs. That
Yeah.
was my bottom line, right? And so that was what sparked me going into even further and further and trying to track back human history and looking at the cycles of time, but especially the human history, because when I was told that the Anunnaki existed, they were on the Earth about this many years ago. Atlantis existed, it was on the Earth about this many years ago. Lemuria existed about this many years ago. All these different components, a lot of them seem to overlap. So I was wondering, like, are these the same stories? Are they like completely different stories, but they happen over and over again? Did history repeat itself? Because it seems to have done that many times, and almost like a genetic soup that creates certain avatars that come down to the planet that have the exact same genetic soup as an avatar that was said to come to the planet 2,000 years prior. Was this avatar that came 2,000 years prior the original avatar, and then 2,000 years later they just redid the story? Or did it happen the exact same way again because the stars aligned a certain way, creating that manifestation of that person, right? So
Yeah.
this
Like
is the
it like
curiosity
dialed
that led me
into the
here.
portal.
Right. Like, and a good example would be Jesus. You know, like
Yeah.
as much as I want to, like, I don't actually want to. I don't. Like when I say as much as I want to believe that he's alive, I don't mean like, oh, if he was, did exist or did not exist, it's okay. Both are okay with me. But the whole thing with Jesus is that there's many stories around him that was created hundreds of years after his life. So we do know that a lot of things that have been created about him, even maybe the crucifixion, could be a complete fabrication. For example, 325 AD was when the crucifixion story was actually written and put in induction within one of the Gospels. So was he an enlightened being, and then they added all this other mythological and mystical elements to
Yeah.
him based on ancient stories? Or what, the jury's still out for me, because
Right.
unless I was there, I use, sometimes my discernment might be a little too much, but
Mhm.
that it makes me a huge skeptic.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like,
And like, where's the missing years, you know?
yeah, exactly. And that goes into the Urantia
Yeah.
book. The Urantia book talks about his missing years. This text, it is a text that was found in Tibet that was scrolls that talked about Jesus' missing years, says that he was in India and that he studied with the Buddhists. And for the first 300 years, Gnostic Christianity was actually pretty much Buddhism. And what I believe happened was, we're going off on a tangent here, but it's still within the context of everything, is that I believe that he was teaching people the Buddhist meditation technique that was creating complete liberation.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was hijacked by Constantine, and they had to kind of change things around a bit, was because people were being liberated from this reality, from the matrix.
Yeah.
And in order to create control, they created this whole entire thing around it. They took out the book of love, took out the book of reincarnation. There were hundreds of gospels, many of them were thrown away. This is all documented, right?
Yeah.
So these kind of questions made me realize that history as we've been taught it is completely a farce, and not entirely, but quite almost
Yeah.
entirely. There's a lot of
There's a
history being
narrative.
written and written. Right. It's been written and rewritten by the victors so many times that we're so fragmented from the truth that, let's talk about 20,000 years ago. Humans were supposed to be primitive, but now we're finding structures that are more advanced than even what we can think of doing now. However, conventional archaeologists still will tell you that we were primitive at that time, even though they're finding evidence that we weren't.
Yeah.
Things keep getting swept under the rug. So why is that? Is it institutional, that people don't want to get ridiculed and that people don't want to lose their jobs or not get funding? Or is it some sort of nefarious plan in order to take us down a different timeline, that where we don't know the truth of who we were in our past, right? So what I've kind of outlined in the last 10 minutes were are my two conflicting thoughts that I've been having around these things. And the reason why I won't go 100% with one is because unless I'm there, I really don't know what happened, but I
Yeah.
can only speculate, really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the the proof is, all around us, all throughout all different cultures, all throughout the world. And that's the part that really has enticed me with this information as well. And especially the most ancient texts. When you go and you look, at the most ancient text you can find, it has this common thread of this story of how we were seated here.
Mhm.
And in that story, it's really fascinating how, the beings from off planet came down and they lusted for the beings on the planet, and they mated, or they, had some kind of genetic altering. However, it was scientific or natural, we're not sure, but that's the story is, universal. And then there was a creation of this other being, and often it's, of giant, or, there's all these different stories of how it's interconnected all throughout time. And that's really fascinating for me as well. I would love for you to go into how this is interconnected with time travel, because that was really fascinating when you were speaking about simultaneous time and how, we become our ancestors.
Yes, for sure. So let me add to what you're saying,
Yeah.
firstly. So yeah, when you go back to the ancient scriptures and ancient sites, right? So they say the Sumerian scriptures are one of the oldest ones that are left on the planet, and that's around, I don't know, 4 or 5,000 BC or something like that. And the reason why they say that is because we don't really see written language until that time anyway. So
Yeah.
those scriptures was like almost the first time that we started writing things down that was passed down for thousands of years. And then pretty soon after that, around 3000 BC, we see the rise of the Indus civilization that, you know, Mohenjo-daro was a part of, Harappa, that's in current day Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? When we start seeing this the civilization emerge, and we're looking at the culture of it now, it's looked at as a completely independent culture because it was so different and diverse from anything else that we had seen on the planet. So a lot of historians and scholars say, well, the civilization appeared to come out of nowhere. But when you track the migration routes and you look at what the Indus civilization was, it looks like it might have been kind of a safe haven, almost like an experimental ground for society that many people from other civilizations came from, namely the Kush civilization that was a part of Egypt, ancient Egypt, around 3000, 4000 BC, may have migrated over the Red Sea through current day Yemen all the way into Afghanistan and inhabited that area. But also there's a direct connection to the Elamites. And the Elamites are, here is Mesopotamia, here is Samaria, and there's a river, and the Elamites were on the other side. They
Yeah.
coexisted for thousands of years next to each other. They even had the same gods. Like the whole everything was the same. They were at war with each other for hundreds of years. They were like friends for another 100 years. They traded for 1,000 years. You know, all types of experiences over it. But that directly connects the maybe the Babylonian and the Egyptian text and scriptures and dogma to the current Indus civilization, which was the founding civilization for what eventually became Sanskrit, and then the Vedas, which then permeated the whole of India. So that's the direct connection there from the Indian text, the Mahabharata, Krishna, the lightning bolts in the skies on golden carriages, you know, all of those elements directly connect back to ancient Mesopotamia. And all the Indian gods are actually have Greek counterparts. So the Greek and the Indian gods are the same ones. So I just want to throw that in there because that's what I'm really researching right now. Because you asked me earlier what I'm doing right now, and I've watched like 200 hours in videos in the last 4 months on this, and I'm taking notes and everything because I'm trying to figure out how I came to be, how in Northern Indian Neil existed. So by doing that, I started finding out that wow, ancient Egypt was probably one, looks like in our recent history was probably one of the most advanced civilizations on the planet. And you know how interesting it is? It was around for thousands of years, but do you ever hear of an Egyptian empire? You don't hear of an Egyptian empire. All these other Greek invaded and conquered Egypt, Rome conquered Egypt. The Egyptians welcomed Alexander, a foreigner, as their savior, and welcomed him as the new pharaoh and everything, and he adopted it. They even accepted an outsider. To me, it's almost like that was the remnants of a very advanced, spiritually advanced civilization that didn't need to go out and conquer, but they were still very heart based and very opening and accepting to outside influence, which eventually actually caused their demise when they started getting to the Romans and all that. But this ancient civilization must have given some of their advanced knowledge to India, which we do see within the Indian text, including evidence that yoga could actually have come from Egypt. But then we have the direct Babylonian gods that connect us to the star beings. And then, of course, if you look at the Indian text, it just looks like a plethora of aliens doing some interesting stuff. You know, even some of the Vedic text talks about there was a race from Earth to Pluto in golden carriages and back to Earth. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it just sounds, to me, that sounds like almost like a space race with different starships.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's stories, you know, in indigenous Americas as well. They're separated by oceans, and they're very, very similar. The stories of the star beings, the star people, the nations, the different nations from different star systems, and how they came down with different information. And it's just super fascinating, and how that really is interconnected throughout our whole creation story.
Yeah, I mean, if you go on a search engine and search ancient civilizations that say they came from the Pleiades, right?
Yeah.
You'll go to Wikipedia, and it will be a list of like hundreds of different civilizations all over the world that all say they're from the Pleiades. And then you go in deeper and click on each one of them and read what they say, and it's just like, whoa, there's a lot of similarities here. And of course, some of them didn't have the name the Pleiades at that point. They were calling it like how many stars it was and different things, or where you would see in the night sky.
Sisters and
yeah, there's too many things that connect that are very have very low chances of having that kind of similarity, but they still do, which makes you have to question things, which is why when people come and say pseudo archaeology and they don't they don't even spend the time to research it or give you a valid reason why, but try to say something like, you're just saying that the natives of that land were too ignorant to create those structures. Those are the kind of arguments you get instead of actual credible, like scientific arguments. Oh, well, actually, no. The reason why there are this many stones in the Great Pyramid in Giza isn't because it's the exact light years from Earth to Sirius, but because of this. There's nobody giving those explanations. You know,
Yeah.
they're just throwing it under the rug. And people that are exploring these things are saying like, "Whoa, this is kind of out of the world. There's some huge connection to the stars going on here."
Yeah. And it proves that they were actually more advanced than
Exactly.
historians are saying, because it proves, that they have these extra perceptory abilities. They have, ESP, they're able to
Hmm.
levitate things and all sorts of abilities that, they're discrediting our human evolution and how we have actually had these abilities that maybe were shut down in the fall when
Yes.
we realized that, what was it, that they ate the fruit of the knowledge of
Hmm.
good and evil. So it was
Yeah.
learning duality that made them fall, right? So made us fall,
Hmm.
or however you want to look at that. And so now it's like that recycle of the integration. And I really love how you spoke about India as well, because the story of the yugas and the different cycles that have been documented and noted throughout time, and how there are certain energies that follow in those,
Hmm.
patterns of the cycle.
Yes.
And it's just super fascinating that this
Hmm.
this information has been preserved for us. And when we look at that, we can also start to see that some of these issues or problems that they're saying that are in society may actually just be part of a greater cycle, that we're here to
Hmm.
now be the dawning, the initiatory phase of the next yuga, or the next cycle, or the next age, where they
Yeah.
speak about, age of Aquarius, or the age of Pisces. How, like, that, I love how you spoke about the portal, because I've often thought that the portal for, crisis energy was aligned with that age of Pisces, and that's why they show, the Vesica Pisces as the symbol of the Christ energy. And
Hmm.
so, and I always say Christ was never a Christian, he was Christ.
Exactly.
He was a
That's what I
Christed
say too.
being.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and
So,
especially I say that for Buddha as well. For
yeah,
most, I mean, like for all, I would think all prophets that have an enlightened state will definitely not be like, follow me, do this after me. But
yeah,
for the Buddha, it was literally documented because it's documented that he actually existed, was a person. There's no doubt about it.
yeah.
But he straight up said it. So technically, if you create a religion after this person, aren't you doing the complete opposite?
Of what they
And
said.
you're
Exactly.
starting.
Idolizing. They say don't do the idolizing. And
Yeah.
my godmother always said there's a hidden book in the Bible. It's the words of just Jesus.
Mm,
If you take all the other stuff out,
yes.
there's a hidden book in there, and it will teach you all sorts, or it'll affirm to you all sorts of things you
Yeah.
already knew.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place to really connect to that word of that Christed being. When we it's like being a caterpillar, and I speak about this in my book, that there's a stage that we all go through, and we don't know that we're gonna make a chrysalis around ourselves and become a butterfly, but we just go through the phases. We just eat the greens, we go and we climb the tree, and then all of a sudden we're building a chrysalis. Oh wow, it's amazing, and now I'm transforming. And it's not like we planned it, it's not like we knew it was going to happen. We just follow that crysted way, and when we're in that chrysalis, we become a Christed being. We become transformed by the alchemy of crystallization. And it's that massive transformation and transmutation of that denser uh, part of ourselves, that we can move into that higher consciousness.
I agree 100%. And it's like we have a map, like a template, really. And part of the cycles of time and knowing the dates and the energies of the moment is it's very interesting because not only if we can learn from our history and see what happened just by basic archaeological evidence, just by looking at Göbekli Tepe and actually exploring it properly and so much more. And then also looking at the Yuga cycles and seeing what energy it is and what dates they connect and what the future looks like, we can navigate reality in such a
Yeah,
conscious and intentional way. So we've been given these guide stones almost to transcend karma.
Yes.
That's just a very loose term. Some people don't like saying
Samsara.
it. So let's just say like to transcend this cycle that we're in of incarnation and experience on this planet. Well, we could still be incarnated and experience this planet, but we can be fully liberated at the same time.
Mhm.
So, and what's happening now is some people are actually being incarnated here. I feel completely liberated from the cycles because they're actually beacons of frequency that are designed to be here for specific reasons, right?
Yeah.
But and that's my whole thing. Like, not we the if we look at the past and we can see the cataclysms that the Earth has attracted, and I'm jumping all over the place because I want to bring in
That's
some
what this
science
show
here,
is all
but
about.
all right, cool. So like in my galactic origins presentation that is like 3.5 hours long, it's on my YouTube portal to Ascension. In there I show a lot of physics and mainstream science and weather movements and alignments and all that stuff from mainstream. And one of it is that they're showing pre-flood because it's accepted that there was a flood on Earth around 13,000 years ago. It's wide
Yeah.
known, it's conventional, even though it's really within the metaphysical and mystical community. It's actually an accepted fact of science, right? So
Antediluvian times, right?
right.
Pre-flood.
So they showed the axis of the Earth in this graph where it showed pre-flood and post-flood, right? And they showed the fractions and how much the Earth, like to all the mathematics of what shifted within the Earth's axis and how a pole shift occurred at that time. And they're basically outlining that. Oh yeah, and at the bottom in small print it says that Earth is seems to be beating to some sort of cosmic rhythm that is attracting cataclysmic disasters.
Whoa.
Attracting. Okay. So basically, every 13,000 years, something does seem to happen on the planet. There is some sort of cataclysm or whatever, or there's like a flood, or it doesn't have to be the whole planet, right? But seems to be some evidence of that occurring. And they're saying that through this cycle, that there's some sort of attraction going on because just by looking at it back for hundreds of thousands of years, it's almost like the perfect rhythm that the Earth moves into certain parts of the galaxy and then it happens. But what they're doing there is they're giving away a lot more than they think that they are. What they're showing there is that we are literally part of a cycle that has some sort of energy attracting it in order to create a recycling process embedded within the computer program of Earth so that this experiment keeps recycling and changing and having new experiences. Or even that could be true, but to add to that, it could even be we're attracting these experiences to learn how to transcend it. And then you get into the fifth world prophecy with the Hopi, the Toltec prophecy, the sixth sun. And then you start realizing that they're saying that this is the age where we transcend cataclysm, that there's five elements, and the fifth element is the ether element. We've destroyed in the last five cycles, I guess, earth,
Mm.
earthquake, wind, hurricanes, water, floods, fire, scorching volcanoes. We've had those four different types of cataclysms, and now we're in store for the fifth cataclysm, which isn't a cataclysm because it's ether. It's a very high concentration of energy in the photon belt. We're diving back into the galactic center, the Milky Way galaxy, huge
Yeah.
influx of ether. And what happens in this moment is that you're able to ascend without a cataclysm, right? So that's what they prophesize. Whether I'm not going to judge the fact that Earth may attract these cataclysms, and I don't want to transition right now. So I'm going to be like pretending something else is going to happen because I'm not acknowledging the science. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, like I do innately feel within me that we do not have to. We have the technology. This goes back to this now. We have the technology. We have the ancient history evidence that a lot of that has been suppressed from us. We have the mainstream science that is backing all of this, and we have the Vedic cycles that can all show us what occurs on this planet. And if we can look at it rationally with a consensus of the world as one unit, and like we can actually navigate this reality and make sure that we avoid huge cataclysms or destruction so that we have a loss of lives. Like that is possible, right? But it's not happening because we're still stuck within old paradigm thinking. And as we shift and understand linear time isn't what we make of it, and this is a great transition as you're talking about simultaneous time, but it's as we shift and realize that linear time is just a very small perspective in regards to the secular nature of our galaxy. But then if we go even beyond that, we get into time that isn't even secular anymore. And then eventually we probably get into a reality where time doesn't exist because time as we know it, even within our linear universe, is very limited to our planet. So we have a linear universe technically. If I leave here and I go to another sun that's 3 light years away, it'll take me 3 light years. But what am I using there?
Earth
I'm
time.
using the construct of literally the sun to the distance of us on this planet. As soon as I step outside of my planet, Earth
Yeah.
time no longer is Earth time. You could say it's linear still, but it's still is not going to be based on any other construct besides something completely different. So the fact that we go based on this linear time is limited to us not understanding what is going on in the grand scheme of the cosmos and how the cycles are affecting us.
Mhm.
As we shift out of that, right now we can go back to Caesar and when the Gregorian calendar was implemented and how Caesar actually employed someone in Egypt. The calendar that we currently have, the Gregorian calendar, actually came out of Rome, but wasn't actually a Roman invention. It was they had hired someone from Egypt that was tapped into the ancient mystery schools in order to come to Rome and help them craft the new calendar. But when they did it, they gave the guy a certain amount of requirements, right? So he had to kind of mathematically try to create it. And the year after the Gregorian calendar was created was known as the longest year on Earth because I think it was 60 extra days were added to the calendar that year
Wow.
in order for us to get to where we are now, right? So complete like shifting. And how interestingly is it that it happened around 30 AD, right after all this? We shifted the calendar, and 30 years after the birth of Christ, actually around the time Jesus was supposed to be dying, he like died around that time too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm rambling here because there's a lot of information,
Oh, that's
but
so good.
so it looks like that this calendar was imposed on us within this age at the bottom, because the bottom of the Kali Yuga was right around that time too. Like, so we have the Kali Yuga right here, and we were literally right there, about to go on the cusp up. And when we were doing that, there was a new calendar imposed on this planet that kept us stuck within this linear mindset.
Yeah.
However, we're discovering all these other calendars. There's a galactic calendar out there that somebody created now using
Yeah.
other calendars. There's the Maya calendars, the Aztec calendar. There's other calendars that are showing so much more. So we don't have to use the ancient ones. We have the technology and mathematics and computers now to create something even more advanced that probably includes everything. So what I'm getting here is that looking at these going and transcending linear time into something more secular will then help us shift our mindset from moving from linearity, because the construct of linearity that creates aging, beginning and end, dying, birth and death is 50% science and 50% belief system.
Hmm.
We've completely integrated the linearity of when we die, and pretty much everybody on Earth knows that we have around 100 years on the planet. Part of that belief creates that belief.
Yeah.
Part of that belief was imposed on us, and then you get other things that keep you sick, diseases, all these things. Some may be nefariously planted, some are natural, keeps your life limited. After doing that for thousands of years, you completely forget that you're able to live longer. But if you go back to ancient text, you see that it's completely different because
Yeah.
they didn't
Ancient
believe,
Sumerian. They lived
right? They
a
did
1,000 years.
exactly. And
Yeah.
you look at the Sumerian kings list, some of those kings were kings for thousands of years,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So what is going on here? It looks like that we have the potential to live longer. Partly will be shifting our belief systems around that. And the other thing would be changing the frequencies around us to stop being disharmonic. That includes what we eat, that includes what we ingest, that includes what we look at, all these things. And we have the ability to do that. We're just not doing it. So if we were able to do that, pretty soon, I would say we can transcend the linearity of our birth and death, and even get to a point where we start celebrating death and feel connected to those that die, rather than having this mourning because we feel this lack and this loss. That's what we've been into. Now,
Yeah.
do you want to comment on that? Because I'm going to go straight into the simultaneous time and how that
Yeah,
connects.
I will comment for a second because I love
Mhm.
what you were talking about with the connection of the human life cycle and how old we get. Because I was thinking about that earlier in the conversation, is how you can look at the patterns of human, like in a microcosm to the yugas and the cycles of life. You can look at the smaller microcosm of the human life cycle and how there are a kind of a parameter in which our current human life cycle is kind of set at. But then there's always the exception. There's always that person who is 95 years old who looks like they're 60 and is can do jumping jacks and backflips when I have friends that are 30 that have lived a very hard life that are dying or that are in very very bad health. And I have people going asking me how do you stay so young looking? Because I'm almost 40 and I'll be 40 next year. And so I'm just like, well, it's a mindset. I don't see life the same way. And it is about perception. And I love that you tied that in as well, is because when we start to transcend that reality of the cycle of duality of right and wrong, this is when we need to die, these are the parameters in which we live in, and we start to see, okay, maybe the cataclysm isn't exactly bad, right? So for the herb, I'm going to use a alchemy example. So in alchemy, and this ties into the elements as well. So in the different worlds, you have the four elements, and the fifth being ether. Well, in alchemy, you take the four elements and you put them all together, and then when they merge, they create something entirely new, which is almost like ether. And so when we look at it as this cataclysm isn't necessarily going to be something that is bad or wrong, we can start to see and appreciate this evolution of consciousness where we're not seeing things in certain parameters that our human consciousness viewed them as. It's almost like cleaning that lens off and being able to see more clearly. And duality still exists, but not in the same way. You understand that things are good and bad at the same time in their own respect. So I just want to throw that in. So I'd love to go back into that simultaneous time and how it's interconnected with time travel, because as you've explained, time is a fabric and it moves in all directions and it's not linear. It's it could be spirals, it could be spheres, it could be many different ways to perceive this time. And as we start to open our mind and expand that perception, it opens avenues and it opens our abilities to so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everything you said, like, I love, like, it's there's so many directions to go there. So I want to tie it into, like, firstly, the Satya Yuga, the cataclysm, right? That took place 13,000 years ago actually occurred during a golden age, right? We're in the Satya Yuga. So some people think that we were actually went back to a primitive state after that, but what looks like it happened, that as many advanced technologies may have been, washed away, so to speak, but the level of consciousness was still at a very high level. And that's why great civilizations like Egypt could have probably been created around 10,000 BC or even earlier than that. And they possibly had another understanding of time as well, because if you look at the calendars, definitely from civilizations that came after Egypt, like Maya and so many more, they talk about the cycles of time as well. So it makes sense that the Egyptians would also be referring to that when they talk about their ages. So when we transcend and we're in these ages where we're able to tap in to, let's just say the veils are thinner. We're able to connect to source and
Yeah.
divine in much easier way. When we get into a denser reality, it's a little more difficult. We need to certain rituals and tools start getting implemented. Language starts getting implemented. When you're in a higher state, you don't even need to communicate with words, because you can communicate with consciousness and feelings, and you're at such a vibratory state that transparency is okay. Whereas right now, even the most enlightened person might not want you to be transparent with them because we're in this dark age. We all got like some secrets that we don't want to express to other people, right? That are for ourselves. So they looked like that they had an understanding of time that transcended and was secular, but there's definitely something that goes beyond that, and that I would say that's called simultaneous time. And to give my journey on understanding what simultaneous time was, when I first got into all this awareness back in 2001, one of the first people that I met was got introduced to, his name was Jim Self, and he had something called a simultaneous. It was a whole presentation on simultaneous time, and what he said in this thing was that we have an electromagnetic field in the shape of a Merkaba, which is, the star tetrahedron.
Yeah.
And that's basically, it's actually a real thing, because, you and I were made out of subatomic particles, and the subatomic particles vibrate. Oh, there you go. Exactly.
The
That's
heart
the one
chakra.
right there. Uh-huh. And the subatomic particles vibrate, and everything that vibrates creates an electromagnetic field, which is why the Earth, for example, Earth has an electromagnetic field. If it wasn't for the electromagnetic field, we'd be hit by the sun's radiation, and life on Earth couldn't sustain itself. So, these things are definitely real. All these bodies have it. So also do humans. We have subatomic particles, they vibrate, creates a subatomic field. If you
Yeah.
want to be kind of simplify it, let's just say the higher the vibration of those subatomic particles, the more expanded your field, right? What
Yeah.
is that? It's a scientific explanation of what an aura is. It's
Hmm.
That's it. So the Merkaba, the star tetrahedron, is the shape that it makes, and through that you're able to use, this is like advanced, like next level after spacecrafts, like after external spacecrafts, we're able to utilize our Merkabas to transport ourselves to different planets,
Yeah.
dimensions, realities, um, and
Ezekiel's
they'll
wheel.
right, exactly. And like not only that, like if we have like seven chakras in our body, right? Let's just say that those seven chakras might connect to seven dimensions, but then we have chakras outside of us going up to the 12th that we may be able to pull on. So if we're able to tap into 12 dimensions of awareness using these energy centers and bring them down to this physical body to live in third dimension, we probably have the potential in our future to utilize these bodies in order to tap into things such as the Merkaba. Maybe that will be 100 years from now. Maybe it'll be 100,000 years from now, because we have so many different levels of consciousness that we're going to be exploring. But when we get to that place, technically we're supposed to transcend time. And what Jim Self said was that when your atoms in your the subatomic particles are now going at 3/4 the speed of light, you're able to transcend time within your human body and travel astrally into the simultaneous time realm and see all your incarnations simultaneously and able to go in there and correct certain timelines. So that
Wow,
was my
that's fast
first
to happen.
introduction. Yeah, and it was pretty cool that I got introduced to that as almost the one of the first videos I ever watched.
Wow.
So my whole
That's like the
foundation,
0 point energy, right?
yeah, that's exactly what it is. And like, so my whole foundation of everything that came after with Portal to Ascension all came from my basic understanding of time being that kind of construct that can transcend simultaneous time. So if that's the case, what does simultaneous time mean? Simultaneous time means all time is happening at the same instant. How do we prove something like that? Well, mainstream physics are also saying now that when you go into higher dimensions, because they admit that higher dimensions exist, CERN has said that they actually got a subatomic particle to move from this dimension to the fifth dimension. That's
They
accepted as
did.
something they've done. Yep. Basically, they created a mini portal by bombarding two photons together. A photon disappeared. They wondered where it went. They started researching it, and they said, "Oh, it's escaped into a fifth dimensional space in which time has another point." Right.
The Hadron Collider.
Right. Yeah. So in linearity, you have a beginning and end, 2 points of time, right? And when you go into another dimension, you have another point of time, and it becomes like a triangle. And then if you go to a higher one, technically more points, the more fluid it becomes, and then time, past, present, and future, you cannot make it out in the same way that you can now. So
Yeah.
some people speculate, and they would even say they know because they channel or whatever else, that when you go into these realms where times have more points or time becomes so much fluid, that you're able to navigate in and out of all these realities and actually manifest yourself into any dimension that is lower than you just to kind of have some influence or have play around within that reality. So these extraterrestrial beings that we've heard about, seed races, if you want to go into one of the stories, it would be like, for example, the Prism of Lyra, which is a great book talking about how the first humanoids that are us, our original ancestors, were feline-faced beings that came from the supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius
Mhm.
A, into Sagittarius A, and then immediately went into the star system of Lyra because Lyra actually had planets within there that could inhabit physical life, so they incarnated into there. But what the story goes into is that they existed in a dimension where time wasn't the way that we currently see it. So technically, in the realm of simultaneous time, the ancestors that originally came to do what they had to do are still doing what they did because time doesn't exist and that reality is occurring simultaneously right now. And as they came into, let's just talk within the linear context because that's how our mind operates. As they came into our galaxy and started having duels in their own solar system, disagreements with other planets, colonizing their own solar system, and then spreading out into the Milky Way galaxy, they came across a race of beings that was actually, it was a one original race, but it became multiple types of races after that. And that race of beings were actually the reptilian race, right? Because the reptilians and the draconians and the dragon races had been in our solar system, I mean, in our galaxy for millennia and millennia before we even incarnated into here. So, and they weren't all negative. There were all types of things. They were living in duality. There were positive serpentine beings. There were negative serpentine beings. As we started going out, we started interacting with other races, including the serpentines and the reptilians. Alliances were formed. Some alliances with humans and reptilians against humans and reptilians, right? It wasn't like all humans were together. The millennia and millennia passed, and we started seeding most of the galaxy. Went to the Sirius constellation. The some of the most like well-known ones that we went to and definitely incarnated into, and wasn't just one race but probably had multiple races there, was Sirius, the Pleiades, the Arcturians, which isn't just one race. It's just an area, it's a realm that could have multiple civilizations within it. And as we were doing that seeding, even the Orion's belt, wars were taking place, and the drama started getting even more and more diverse. Eventually, these beings, the Syrians and the Lyrans, found themselves on Earth. On Earth at that point, there was another race of beings here. They're original Pleiadians. And if you read the book The Bringers of Dawn by Barbara Marciniak, they call the Pleiadians the original Earthlings. And the reason why they called the original Earthlings is because before they went to the Pleiades, they were on Earth. But when the Lyrans and the Syrians came, because all of them had same ancestry and they were aware. So on this planet, we exist in this realm of amnesia. We don't have complete remembrance. Right. Many of these higher dimensional races, they'd incarnated for millions and millions of years with complete remembrance of all their lives, you know? So they came and they had a lot of baggage with each other. And so the Pleiadians really didn't want anything to do with the Lyrans and Syrians, because they had like a huge history of disharmony between them. So they left and they went and they started inhabiting the Pleiades, and the current Pleiadians that we talk about, the Nordic beings that we say are from there. These are how they got there. However, the Lyrans and the Syrians, they were on Earth, and they wanted to do one of the first genetic manipulations of the Homo erectus on the planet at that time. Wow. And we heard this story a lot of times, Anunnaki story, multiple hybridization stories. If you look at my creation stories of ancient civilizations, there's a whole section on just the ancient stories of hybridization and manipulation of beings on this planet. Happens many times. Either it's one story or it happened many, many times, right? That it kept happening over and over again. So this one could have been the original version of it all. So as the Lyrans and the Syrians were on the planet, they could not actually have an effect and change the DNA makeup of the current humanoid on the planet. And the reason why is the Pleiadians were already on the planet doing genetic experiments, and they've already put like a safe code basically in the DNA of the humanoid on the planet. So the only way the Lyrans and the Syrians could actually have an effect is to go to the Pleiadians that already left and said, basically, screw you guys, we don't want anything to do with you, and employ them to actually assist them in the genetic creation of Earth. And the Lyrans basically said, hey, we're going to create this like paradise planet. We're going to incarnate into a lower dimension. We're going to be able to have these experiences that we can't have within these higher dimensions. It's going to be a great time. Let's help us out. So they decided to say yes, and that's when races from these three star systems started actually manipulating the DNA on the planet, and they created a perfect embodiment of who they wanted to be on this planet. Now we get into the Bible story. So we have the Garden of Eden, and we have the fifth dimensional paradise. These beings wanted to create a fifth dimensional paradise for whatever beings that they were creating, but they wanted to have the ability to incarnate into this lower dimension, into these bodies, to have the experience of duality, to have the range of frequencies of emotions. That was the whole intention, but to be in such a beautiful paradise planet. So the Syrians started getting kind of questioning the Lyrans' motive and started saying, you know what, it looks like what you're doing here is kind of violating their free will. You're creating these beings, but then you're not giving them free will, because you're incarnating them and creating them in a free will dimension. Like, they're literally in a free will universe, but you're creating a planet where they can only do what you're basically giving them the ability to do. So the Syrians were the ones that came to Earth. You know how this occurred? We don't know. This is just a metaphoric story about what occurred, right? The Syrians came to Earth and they said to the humans that, hey, these beings that were working with the Lyrans, they want to actually they want you to actually live in this dimension like this, in this way, but we think you should have the choice to choose. Do you want to have this experience or duality? Now we have the introduction of the apple of the tree, right? So the apple was the tree of knowledge, right? And said, okay, so basically now we get to the Bible. So the Old Testament, the story of God creating the fifth dimensional reality are the Lyrans. The story of the snake giving saying eat from the tree are the Syrians. Was the Syrians bad? No. Were the Lyrans bad? No. The Lyrans just had a long experience of a lot of hardships, and their traumas led them to wanting to create this planet. Were the Syrians bad? No, they literally thought that the Lyrans were violating free will, and they came down and they said something to the planet. Maybe they had duality in there. Maybe there were some people that had good and bad motives. Who am I to even judge what that means within a higher dimension, good and bad, right? So like, but if you look at the original story, it looks like that there was just kind of this disagreement of what would happen on this planet, and the reason why we went into grace and fell into the karmic cycles because of our choice to accept what the Syrians said, which is why also if you look at some people that do like Syrian channeling and things like that, you have a serpent that represents them, which directly connects them to the snake. So then this story gets taken throughout history and is a positive story until it's basically made into the devil, right? And the snake becomes a devil instead of the bringer of free will. And now you have the duality of good and bad that probably originally came from a neutral reality where they were just attempting to experiment with humans on Earth. But we've kind of made this, demons and all this stuff. I'll just say one more thing because I want to tie into simultaneous time. So they lived in other dimensions that technically were higher than our dimension, but when you're in a higher dimension, you're able to come down into a lower dimension if you want to. So it looks like that's what happened. They probably existed in this realm of simultaneous time, but what they also did was many different civilizations over the millennia started not only incarnating into our bodies, right, all types of places from all over, but they also started contributing DNA to the genetic makeup of the human. And now why I say that we're probably one of the largest light shows in the universe or in our galaxy right now, at least, is because many different civilizations have donated DNA to the human program. And by donating the DNA, they're completely curious to see how this is going to act out. You know, like humans, for example, we have multiple. If you listen to Bashar, right, you or so many other people, we have 17 different DNAs of ETs in us alone, right? And then we have ant people from different planets that are probably related to the ants on our planet, right? So and if you hear stories about other races and civilizations, how often has any channeler, any researcher, any whistleblower ever talked about a world where there's millions of different species and how they're interacting with each other? Not really. The reason why there's two things. Within the third dimension, it is actually difficult for life to start because you are a victim of your surroundings, right? That's why the Goldilocks, you can transcend that within this dimension. But that's why you need a specific makeup. Goldilocks zone, heat right here, plants need to grow there, amount of water, all these different elements. So for life to flourish on a level like it is on Earth within this dimension is a rare occasion. But so maybe a civilization or something could do that and it would take some time for them to get to that point. But then when you get into other dimensions, mainstream physicists are also saying the same thing, that when you get into other dimensions, you're now able to control your surroundings and environment even more so because you're no longer a victim to time, you're no longer a victim to the heat of the sun, and you are able to tap into maybe some innate abilities that you're able to transcend being hurt from those elements. So if you're in those realities and you're no longer able to be, you know, affected by them, we hear all of these stories of these civilizations, but we don't hear about a whole planet full of a bunch of different races. We hear like about one race here, two races on this planet. These beings come from here, the Syrians from here. But on Earth, you have all of this life flourishing, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I feel we're definitely, one of the biggest light shows and we're being looked at. But what they've also done is done something incredible, which is by incarnating into lower and lower dimensions, they started going into time being fluid, time being less fluid, less fluid, less fluid, secular, linear, right? And now we're in a reality that because we live in linearity, it is in our future, in our linear future, that we will eventually leave this planet. Our DNA will go and experience different places, and we will become, when we get to those dimensions, the beings that created us in the first place. So
Mhm.
what they did was, in essence, they seeded themselves, right? They came down here, seated themselves. They saw everything because they already, when you're in that state of consciousness, you already know how it's all going to play out. Your complete awareness. They came and seated themselves, and in our future, we're destined to become all the beings that eventually are all over our universe. Because in our dimension right now, they don't exist.
Yeah.
But in our dimensions that we're heading to in our future, they exist. We become them. We go integrate with them. Who knows what else is going to be happening.
I love that because I have heard the explanation about the Zeta Reticuli about how maybe the explanation of abductions or things is because they went on a timeline that wasn't compatible to
Yeah,
continuing their civilization. They lost their ability to
to ascend.
reproduce, and
Hmm.
they lost their ability to love. And
Yeah.
so they were going back in time to circle back and try to reintegrate the mistakes that they had made
Hmm.
and to shift that into a different timeline where
Mm.
we didn't create our own demise.
Yeah.
And I really like that explanation. It gave me the truth bumps. I was like, oh wow, that explains so much. And then being able to apply that on a larger scale to different civilizations that may be us as well. And
Hmm.
that really rings true to me with the escaping the limitations of duality as we move back into our birthright, because that's one thing that happened with me is I had a lot of trauma growing up, and I had a lot of limitations that I put on myself, a lot of fear that I lived in. And as I was able to go back into my memories and to heal certain fears and to forgive certain people that wronged me, to basically rewrite my memories, then when I came back to this reality, the way that I am able to interact with reality is like so much more freeing. It's a different reality, and I have way more power. I literally activated my DNA in going, back into my memories, time traveling through my subconscious from that 0 point energy
Yeah.
and going into where those pain and those hurt and all those limitations were really held in the very beginning stages of, my programming, and
Yeah.
reprogram myself. And then I was able to um, run a new program. And it was really, really beautiful because, it's that understanding that even though the insect is ruining your crop that you planted, it's not really your crop in the first place. It's
Hmm.
not a villain because all it's doing is eating. And you can start to understand and interplay with nature on a different level instead of being like, I'm the farmer, I planted the crops, you're ruining my crops, I'm angry. And then having a whole different reality of like wanting to put poison on your food.
Yeah.
And then you can have an understanding that, okay, your insects trying to eat. What can I give you to eat so you won't eat the crops that I want to eat? Well, how
Hmm.
can I provide these extra companion plants, is what they call them? How can I bring in beneficial insects that will eat the non-beneficial insects? How can I bring in, different herbs that will repel those non-beneficial insects?
Hmm.
And then you start to live a more symbiotic relationship with your environment, and you don't have to spray poison on your food
Yeah.
because why are you eating? It's for sustenance, it's for energy, it's for chi, it's for flavor. And when you put poison on your food, you're losing the flavor, first of all, on the most basic level, but then you're losing the sustenance, the chi, the energy, all that life that you're trying to create. So
Yeah.
it's important to uh, really put that analogy onto how we look at the world around us. And we
Hmm.
start to realize, like, even though these villains, these reptiles or whatever, seem to be negative or charged in a malicious or nefarious way, really, if you look at the story of the dragon, you have uh the people in Europe that wanted to kill the dragons
Yeah.
because they were taking the jewels and are coming into their territory. Well, really it was the dragon's territory, but the people came into the dragon's territory. It's like when you
Yeah.
start to realize the difference between these stories and what could have actually happened, you go into the dragon's reality, it's a little different, you know
Hmm.
and the same with like Asian cultures that have the good luck dragons, and the dragon is the most powerful sign in the zodiac, and
Hmm.
yeah, in the zodiac. And it's just a beautiful display on how our perception dictates our reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at like even other Eastern religions like Hinduism, you have the serpent all over the place, and
Yeah.
Vishnu has like this little crown of snakes. And so that was something I looked into a while ago as well. Is like, the fact that there's all this serpentine, reptile, dragon kind of mythology everywhere. And for my research, obviously the Eastern philosophies are talking about some sort of Kundalini energy, and not only that, some of them are actually talking about advanced sciences when they talk about anything to do with serpents and has to do with some sort of quantum physics or vibrational science. In the Sumerian scriptures, they utilize the snake a lot in different areas where you can speculate that they're talking about DNA hybridization or
Yeah.
something. But then, yeah, the Kundalini energy, and then you get to the Western world, and what is it? Let's tame the dragon, right?
Hmm.
So there's two schools of thought there. Some people think that they were afraid of the Kundalini because it was too powerful. So it was actually a
Power.
conscious effort of like, hey, you need to tame your dragon because the Kundalini is not ready to awaken. And then other people think that it was just like a kind of a plot from the beginning to make people hate their the serpent energy within themselves so that they would never be enlightened. But it's definitely a metaphor, and the reason why it's throughout all of our history is because we had this connection not only to the serpent within ourselves, which is a metaphoric energy, but then also the reptilian DNA within ourselves, the connection to our ancestors and the dragons that lived in our universe. And they said that the mantis beings and the dragons are some of the wisest and the oldest civilizations within our um, galaxy, and they have a lot of insight and inspiration to give us. But
Mhm.
we've also demonized that because we look at things in this world as good and bad. So when we think of reptilians, there's so many people that just think reptilians bad.
Mhm.
But then there's texts that actually refer to certain reptilians as serpentine beings that were advanced beings that came down here to give us wisdom, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's like the healers, the symbol of the healer in ancient pagan times was the snake.
Mm-hmm.
And when St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland, it was actually driving the healers and the witches out of Ireland. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize that's what the celebration of St. Patrick's Day is actually all about. And
Mm-hmm.
they, made people saints that weren't necessarily fully sainted in their intentions in the first
Yeah.
place. But, that's a full narrative application, but you can see that application in the caduceus, the symbol
Mm-hmm.
of the medical staff.
Medical, yeah.
And they only use one snake usually, or sometimes you'll see the both snakes, which are, usually the more higher enlightened doctors. But it's still a
So
symbol in
interesting.
our modern day symbology as a healer.
Yeah.
So we can look at that and see that other side of the snake energy and really appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was demonized hardcore, just from the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Like that has actually affected many religions that weren't anti-snakes,
Yeah.
just because that whole concept of the snake being evil. And it's interesting, like I read somewhere, I don't even know, I have to kind of back it up and look into it. But the snakes, like I think there was a certain type of snake that didn't have a pineal gland. So it was like, and most animals do, right? So it's just like maybe it's already enlightened, you know what I mean?
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, so but it's very interesting. I remember on the Sumerian scriptures, I saw an image of the giant of a giant sitting on a chair with a snake like coming out of its mouth, and then a little humanoid on the other side of it. And the translation of that was that like coming through a wormhole to do genetic manipulation to create this humanoid that was a product of that original being. The whole concept of made in our image and our likeness.
Oh, I love that depiction. So
Mm-hmm.
much more like full bodied than some of the archaeologists would have given it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that is just a beautiful explanation of really what is going on in our world today. And I really feel like we are at this precipice of this, opening of a great portal that we're able to step in at this time and really like connect to the highest potential that we want to create. And that is why we have, the other aspect of star seeds, and how we have come back into these incarnations at this time to live on the ground, be boots on the ground, to be here on this earth, to experience this like great shift of humanity, not just experience it, but through experiencing it, actually creating it. And that
Yeah.
is like that full loop circle about how like we are creating who we were to be who we are, because living in the now is understanding that time doesn't exist, and that is like our truest, highest
Mhm.
potential, because you, when you project yourself in the future, you lose track of what's now. You
Yeah.
can't appreciate all of the beauty that's around you in the moment. And when you're too worried about the past, you can't really truly
Be
be
present.
in a wholeness state, and
Yeah.
you can't tap into 0 point. That's like the key, is like pull yourself, all of yourself back from all the places you've projected into, and then really connect into the center. And that is, and then starting to like be in gratitude and love, and all of these different really high frequency energies are going to change the way that we vibrate, change the
Mhm.
way that our frequency is reflecting and magnetizing our reality around us. And that is one of the most fascinating parts about all of this, is as we shift our reality, the reality shifts around us. It's,
Mhm.
I think, as Max Planck, he said, as you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mhm.
And that is one of my favorite quotes, and I think Bruce Lipton as well used that. And it's just a really empowering way to approach what we're going through at this time.
Yeah. I watched a documentary a few years ago, and the documentary was trying to find out who are the happiest people on the earth, right? And they found a little, I think it was an island off the coast of Greece or somewhere in Europe, and they thought that they were the happiest. And when they did some research on why, the answer was they had the least expectations of themselves.
Yeah,
which is hilarious in itself because it's said in a kind of a like a negative connotation way. They have no expectations of themselves. But they really meant, if you dissect that a little bit, is that they were so present with their current situation and what they were doing and fishing and eating and living, that they did not plan all these different things for the futures,
yeah,
and or set all these goals that were going to lead them to
yeah.
for
And they were
disappointment.
living so much in gratitude.
Right, and their expectations and the goals, I'm sure everybody has them, but they were probably more practical and in the moment based on their
Yeah,
culture and what they needed at the time. So it's just so interesting that the more present they became, the more happy you are, because then you become free of time, and time is this decaying energy that is like everything comes and goes, right? But what is consistent is this moment will always be here, so you can tap into it. So people used to ask, because people conflicted on the word ascension. I've had, as of the last 5 years, I haven't had that much backlash on the word ascension, but every now and then somebody's angry about it. But before that, I would get like a good amount of emails every, why are you using ascension? Ascension's BS. Why are you trying to escape the planet? And pre 2012, there's all this information about ET's coming down in 2012, and you need to jump on the. Some people saying you need to go off with them. Some people saying that you should stay. So that was all connected to Ascension, and since that was connected to Ascension, people were like, "Oh, escapism, escapism." So the word Ascension for some became connected to escapism.
Mhm.
But if you really get to the root of what Ascension is, every single moment we're transcending,
Mhm.
right? We're transcending. Those are little ascensions, right? We're transcending something. Even when we're in the dark age, we're literally having to transcend our like voices in our head, the BS around us,
Yeah.
fluoride in the water. We're having to transcend many, many times. But an ascension is basically, an evolution while we're moving upwards. Look at the cycles of time. If you want to just get technical with it and just look at that with the dates, then be like, oh, technically we're ascending. Okay, look at it like that. But then what an ascension isn't just like one phase where you just there and now you've ascended. You're constantly ascending and descending and doing all types of things. But the whole thing of escapism and ascending to a world or doing something so you can go into another world, to me is contrary to what ascension is, because the only way that we can ever get into an ascended reality is by being present in the moment.
Yeah.
Ascension in its work in itself is a paradoxical term,
Yeah.
because it symbolizes a beautiful, I guess, utopian type world where we're all living in peace and oneness. But the only way to get there is not to concentrate on the fact that you need to be there, but
Mhm.
to find that in this moment.
Yes.
So the more all of us find that can own that in this moment, the more likely we are to create the ascended world. The more you're like, oh my God, this has happened to me. The reptilians are out there doing all this crap. They are after me. They're doing everything wrong. We need to keep going in order to create that ascended world. Well, you're coming from a
Yeah.
huge lack mentality, and what you resist actually persists. The universe is one big Xerox machine. It just Xeroxes what you want. It's not judging you.
Exactly.
You want to create a thought process of something how it's far away from you. Well, it's going to keep giving you that. If you want to figure out the tools and techniques to transcend your trauma, to work on your current life traumas, what happened when you were a child, or even go even further into past lives, you can do that. And what is the end result is you're just going to be happy in the moment right now, right?
Yeah.
And you're able to do more things. Like another argument I would get was that, well, if you're doing all, if you're so present in the moment and you're transcending the worry of the future and the past, what's going to stop you from saving the starving kids in Africa? So, a question like that. Well, what about them, right? So, but my answer is, whenever you're coming from a place where you're not present, you're coming from a reactory place and you're never doing anything from a rational, harmonious perspective because
Yeah.
you're coming from lack. This isn't happening. We need to change this now. It might be a good energy to fuel the beginning of a movement. But when you're within the movement, if you're coming from an emotional trigger almost all the time because you're like, oh my God, this needs to be fixed, it's probably not going to happen in a great way. You're probably going to go on the other extreme. That's what we see a lot from people that are anti something so passionately
Yeah.
that we find them going on the other extreme. What
That
did they do?
magnetizes it.
They just manifested more duality by doing
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. It's
When
like
you
a
become
worry is
present,
a prayer for something you don't want.
right, exactly. And when you become present, what are you? You're now the singularity. When you're not present, you're reacting, you're the extreme opposites of it all.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. It's so true. And I love that you brought up the actual meaning of the word ascension, because if we want to get into etymology and we want to go into like the basic literal term of what most people use the word ascension, it's often a mountain climb, right? It's the climbing of a mountain. And if you apply everything that you just said about spiritual ascension, it is exactly what you need to do when you are climbing a mountain. You need to focus on what's
Uh,
happening
yeah.
right now. If you start focusing on getting on top of that mountain or what happened before, you're going to fall and get hurt. Or something could, you're not hearing what's around you in nature, and it's really important to be in the moment when you're climbing a mountain. It's important to know that there are going to be down hills and up hills and down her hills and then upper hills. And even though you're climbing a mountain, it's not going to look like that the whole time, right? You're going to have to go switchbacks. You're going to have to cross some streams. You're going to have to
Yeah,
do a lot of,
you're gonna have to go back to your campsite a few miles back because it's too snowy ahead.
yeah, or because there's the cougar, or because,
Yeah.
you never know what is ahead of you. And yeah, you may run out of water. You may have left your backpack too close to a wild animal. You never know. So there's always, an application within nature to look at ourselves and to see how this ascension process is playing out.
Hmm.
And it is that climb, that shift in energy, the shift in consciousness. Once you're at the top of the mountain, you are not the same person as you were when you started. You may have had a lot of fear. You may have had a lot of self-doubt. You may have had a lot of just non-resonant emotions that aren't your truest, highest self. But as you move up that mountain and you start to look down upon everything that you just did, upon the view that you just created for yourself, you start to see things in a different light. You start to see it in this amazing, beautiful way. You see all those struggles and you're like, wow, I'm so much stronger. This is amazing. And you have gratitude for the journey and you have gratitude for that moment. And in that gratitude, it opens up all these doorways, like you said, the people on that island, they learn to be in gratitude, not to worry about, oh, I had this expectation to get 10 fish today, because I wanted this money. They're like, Great Spirit will provide me this fish, and whatever I'm provided, I'm thankful for. And when you get that energy, it just magnetizes abundance to you, and then you're more thankful and you're just like, wow, this is beautiful. And you're able to just like step into full manifestation power as well. It activates our interconnection with one another. It activates our interconnection within ourselves to be able to really be the best person that we can be for everyone. And that's really what it's all about in the ascension process, is not just climbing the mountain for yourself. When you climb the mountain, you go up there for a vision quest, and when you're going for a vision quest, you are doing it for everyone, for not only everyone alive, but for everyone in the past, for all your ancestors. You're the answer to your
Yeah.
ancestors' prayers, and you're doing it for the next generations. And that's what we're on in this ascension process is a vision quest. And it's really cool to be able to step into that and to understand that vision quests aren't always comfortable, and they will make us stronger. And it's like that Schumann resonance, you know, they're talking about the Schumann resonance is starting to raise, and or it's been raising, but it's starting to get really, really high frequency vibrations. And that's, I think the earth is going through an ascension process as well, and being creations of this earth. That's what we're doing here.
Yes, I agree. I love your analogy on the mountain. That's so good. Yeah, I completely agree, and that's just what we need to do is completely be present. Which is why when people ask me what does UFOs have to do with spirituality, what does learning about ancient history have to do with spirituality, I wrote an article for a magazine literally called "What Does Meditation Have to Do with UFOs?" That was it, right? And it's because that without getting to that vibratory level and creating harmony within ourselves, this reality that is so diverse is going to look limited to us. But we
Yep.
have tools. We have not only tools within our body, but we have external modalities that we've created after thousands of years that are able to get us to a place where we're able to have open communication with our galactic family, even ancestors. I mean, everything you said is so amazing, and even the whole vision quest thing. Like, if you look at it technically, if we're dreaming ourselves awake into this reality, which can be proven with science now because we're subatomic particles that are vibrating in and out of reality, some sort of organic holographic matrix, technically we're in a lifelong vision quest. We're like on a psychedelic journey for this whole time. And it is actually not even technically, it's literally that. It's
Yep.
just that instead we just took a consciousness something and just like came into this reality rather than eating the plants here. But it's funny how like everything is a reflection of the macrocosm because that's happening. And then on the planet, we utilize the same tools that are actually occurring for us to be here to transcend those things so that we can create more harmony in our own lives.
Yes, and it's like that alchemy, you know, it's like bringing it all together and transcending, transforming, and, you know, really being able to live our highest potential. And that's the coolest part about all of this. And, you know, everything that is on your platform, everything that you've been sharing over the years, and all the awesome conscious conversations that I've been able to share as well, is that it helps to empower each other. It helps to empower us. You know, the individual. I get more empowered the more that I'm able to, you know, open my throat chakra and feel like I have a voice. Because, you know, for years I was, you know, I had all sorts of ideas, and I was like, no, I'm not going to share this with anyone I know, or I'm too limited, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. All of those thoughts have come through my head, and I know they have through almost every person that I know. And we have been able to transform and transmute all of those things for years, and it's so promising and so exciting. And this conversation is really one of those like stepping stones that helps people to really be able to see that, you know, their truth is other people's truth as well, and we are resonating in this reality, and we're not alone. We are empowering one another, and by empowering ourselves, by stepping into our highest potential, we can empower others. And that's really that ripple effect, that butterfly effect, that, you know, 100th monkey that that helps to, it's like that the fabric that connects us all. And we are the mycelium, you know. We may have mushrooms, but we're all connected. That we may look like we're all separate little individual cells, but it's all one body. So, you know, we need to embrace that and do our part. Do what we were meant to do in this incarnation as a human, as, you know, a guardian of this earth and of the ascension process as a main contributor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100% agree. Doing the inner work is so important right now, and like I deal with a lot of presentations, a lot of healers and healing work as well, but definitely a lot of information. And lately, actually, over the last 4 or 5 months, I've been going through some challenges in my own life, and so we cultivate a lot of events, but I've definitely started now figuring out a whole tract of specific healing events, but definitely trauma release for the most part, chanting, breathing exercises, other types of trauma release, because that's what I feel like we need to transcend our traumas to get to a place of stillness so that we can have these conversations.
Yeah.
And what is my goal is unity, right? That's what I've always been about. From the beginning, I've been saying collaboration over competition. We say that the universe is an abundant place, but then we're still competing with each other, even though we're the same people saying that. Why aren't we implementing the fact that we're in abundant reality? Why are people that are both healers competing against each other rather than realizing that the universe is an abundant place? Isn't that the whole thing that we're teaching in the first place? So I always kept that as a foundation for Portal to Ascension, collaboration over competition, because the energy of inclusion is a more harmonious frequency than the energy of exclusion. And the
Mm,
ones that claim to be in power and control us may have the secret, may know about Flower of Life, may have Masonic sacred geometrical temples that they created and have been doing it for thousands of years. But what energy are they coming from? The energy of exclusion, the energy of secretness, and that it's them. So even though they may have all this information and they think that they have so much more than we can ever tap into, but all that information is within us in our DNA that we can unlock. That's really why they think that they can win, is because of that. But what they don't realize is just the fact that they've excluded and creating this whole division, it doesn't work the same energy in
yeah,
the energy of coming together, right? So
exactly.
that's what really needs to occur, is us to do the inner work. Like if there's an equation, do as much inner work as possible, get to a place of stillness, start making decisions about your family and your life, right? Figure out how you can create more unity
Yeah,
and have conversations with people that you don't think that you agree with, right?
absolutely.
Because for I mean, I don't know if we're phasing out right now, but right, this completely goes into my words of wisdom, I guess, for the end of the today. But
Awesome.
maybe I'll save that for when we're ready for that, you know?
Awesome. Yeah, I was just, saying it's definitely about frequency and energy and how we align ourselves. And, it's like leveling up. You can only level up so far in in that mindset. You can only connect
Yes.
so far to activating your DNA on that mindset. The next level has an activation beyond physicality. It's
Hmm.
it's about how we perceive the world and integrate and unity, and it's that safeguard. It really is that safeguard, like the certain spells on Harry Potter, how there's little safeguards of consciousness. You can't
Hmm.
access the stone's magic unless you have a pure heart. It's like that. It's the stone of immortality. You
Hmm.
can't access it unless you have a pure heart. So when we understand that, that's how the real magic happens. And
Right.
I would love to hear any last of words of wisdom that you want to speak about before we close.
Yes. Oh, first let me comment on that. Is that in the 1920s there was actually mainstream physics science on fifth dimensional space, right? Like they were trying to figure out what fifth dimension space is, and the speculation was that, and then they've kind of backed it up since then, is that we have these opposing forces. We have gravitational force, we have magnetism. I think there's four forces. I don't know, so I'm not going to go into that. But there's multiple types of forces that within this dimension are seemingly independent of each other. So the speculation from the 1920s, the mainstream speculation was that when you get into a fifth dimensional space, they assumed that the opposing forces become one,
Mm,
right? Electromagnetism, gravity, all these forces that are operating in our universe doing their own thing start merging together. And then they started doing more science and doing tests, and they believe that that is the case. So what you said earlier about the alchemy within another dimension, how things come together, is almost like these seemingly opposite forces, like earth, wind, fire, and water, four different types of elements. They start merging into one using the construct of ether. And when they start becoming one, you have what? Energy of inclusion, you have unity. So these
right?
beings, these people that are truly just other us's, I guess, are these individuals are just um, or energy, whatever they are, right? Whatever's happening on the nefarious plan out there for us, whatever is going on, it has the energy of exclusion within this reality that we're transcending out of into another realm in which we are having these opposing forces are inevitably going to start joining together. So if you coming from the energy of exclusion, it's almost like Moses at the promised land. You can't even cross over into a realm of alchemy because you're coming from a place where your mindset is completely not that. You might intellectually know all the information you need. You might know the rituals and the chants, whatever you think you need to get there. But unless you're able to be at the vibration of it, you're not going to be able to see it. Great example is UFOs. There's probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of UFOs and crafts around us all the time. But it's a frequency game. That's why it's so spiritual. The reason why we can't see them is because we can only see certain hertz, certain part of the light
Yeah,
spectrum. We can only hear 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz frequency, but those frequencies above and below exist, and we know that we can't perceive them.
Yeah, it's like the dog whistle, you know, we can't hear that, but the dogs can, or
That's
some
the
people
exact
can
analogy I
actually, which
give.
is interesting when
Hmm.
you tune in. It's all about tuning in and dialing into those radio frequencies. All
Yeah,
of the radio frequencies exist all around us all
exactly.
the time. But
Right.
how are we going to align to be a receiver? And, you know, I know
Hmm.
people that have had extraterrestrial experiences. There have been like 5 people in the same field, and 3 people saw clearly what each other saw, and the other 2 didn't. And it was about
Yep. Yep.
frequency. And those 2 people were actually of very fearful energy about that kind of stuff. And that's part of the safeguard as well, is because when you're in fear, you have a reactive system. You go into fight or flight or freeze, and often these beings that, you know, they don't want to create fear within
Hmm.
us, and you know,
Yeah.
so their reality is a different resonance. And so that's often that safeguard of like fear and how that interplays. And so I love that you brought that up, because really, you know, if we go into the work of Tesla, it's all about frequency, vibration, and how we interact with the
Right.
frequency and vibration. It really is. And that's like the best words of wisdom we can leave off with this topic, because it's
Hmm.
so pertinent to this information.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add to that, my closing words here is that, we've lived in this world of duality. There is, opposing beliefs for sure. A lot of people that were in spirituality for, like, that let's just say pre 5 6 years ago, was definitely like permeating in the community of oneness, and we're all like reflections of each other, and how we're all like, part of this thing together, and even the darkness is a part of the light that is actually playing the role that it needs to play. That was understood. But then what I saw over a few years is a slow decay into politicizing almost every single thing on the planet, right? And as that occurred, a huge division occurred, where those that were saying, from all sides, right, that was saying that, we're all one, we're reflections of each other, and embrace the darkness, and that thing that person doesn't agree with me is bringing up something else. All of a sudden, for a lot of people, that got checked to the side, and it became the division element of like, you are not for what I believe, and rather than why are you into it. And then it became like labeling people very hurtful things that might not even really be who they are, just because someone else or the media has categorized them as this, even though those same individuals were anti-media before, you know. So what
I've noticed
I'm
that.
getting at here, is that the concepts that everybody originally thought about us being reflections of one and the darkness working for the light are still real. It never changed,
Mhm.
right? But the challenge of us being and accepting and remembering that and owning that became a little more challenging.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that we forget that completely. It means we need to focus even more so on that. We have so much more in common with each other than we do with any governing elite.
Yes.
Any governing elite, no matter if you think they're good or bad, right? And like, we don't even shop at the same grocery stores as them. They have their food delivered. They probably got one of the Star Trek devices already to give them manifest their.
Replicator.
Yeah, exactly. So seriously, it gets to that level. Like, they cannot even fathom the world that we're in, because when you get to millions and billions of dollars,
Yeah.
it's nowhere near us.
Mhm.
So it's just about creating power. How do they create power? They've been doing it for thousands of years, creating division. Well, they guess
Exactly.
what? They mastered the recipe, right? They so much so they've been doing it for so long, and now it's almost like an equation on how they can actually manifest and do that. So it takes more and more effort in
Yeah.
order to create unity, being at the still point, working on the reasons why you don't accept the other, instead of figuring out why you don't accept the other. Try to be like, why don't I like you? It's because you like this. Why don't I like you? It's because this is what that brings out in me. That's what makes me feel like this. Now
Yeah.
let me think about it rationally. Are you that? Well, what questions would I ask you to figure out if that is you? Well, if that is you, man, I'm sorry, you're gonna have a tough life, but go live your life. Not like this is you and blah blah blah, you know?
Yeah.
So like, all I really would love for the world to do is just get to a point where we can have these conversations and work things out. Even within the UFO community, there's huge division. Portal to Ascension is one of the few platforms that have people on all types of sides having conversations at the same exact event, right? But other than that, there's people throwing shade against everybody all over the time.
It
It's not cool. Like, that's not where we want to head. So we need to check ourselves, and realize what the real intention is here. Do we want to create a beautiful world on do we want to create paradise on earth, which we know is possible, or do we want to create more destruction, division, because we're not willing to confront ourselves, right?
Mm.
So I feel that we are heading in that direction. It's inevitable, right? Cycles of time, we're moving up there, we're heading there. So this to me is just me not being aware of where we're going to head and having the amnesia and telling you something that's definitely about where we're moving anyway, right? So it's like we're getting to that point. Just continue doing the inner work,
Yeah.
really focus on yourself, and reach out to people that you don't agree with, because it's not about creating that separation. It's about creating unity, because we need each other. We definitely need each other, because when you create unity and go off with someone else, that person that is maybe leading you in that direction still isn't you, isn't completely in alignment with your beliefs. Whereas your neighbor that you might have an ideological difference with has like 90% of his life is similar to yours, or has some sort of connection or something that you can relate to, right? So, and I keep rambling, but I like a great example here would be California. No water, we're having a drought, right? You know how the drought was like, there was a whole thing about the drought a few years
Yeah,
ago. But look at the baseball fields and the golf courses. They didn't stop watering them, right? Look at the
exactly.
corporations. They never stopped using water.
They
But
never
what
stopped
happened?
pumping out Nestle water out of the
Yes,
headwaters.
right. But what happened was they made neighbors go against each other.
Yep.
My dad told my neighbor off for watering on a day they should not have watered.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't
Divide and
anybody talking
conquer.
about the? Yeah, look at the baseball fields alone is like more water than we like probably even drink. Like tons of water
Yeah.
per game, right? So it's just like such. It's just in plain sight what's going on right here. Really, we need to check ourselves and just come together as a people.
Yeah, I mean, I love that message to leave off as well, because that's something that I can't express enough, is that divisive tactics, whenever there's a divisive tactic, like really be a detective, ask why, when, where, how,
Mhm.
what's going on here, really get down to it, because divisive tactics all boil down to divide and conquer. We have certain people that have had a lot of power for a long time, and they understand the power in numbers. They understand how powerful we are. And if they want to continue to keep their power, there will be a divisive tactic that gets implemented. And
Mhm.
whether that, is political, or we've seen in so many other ways, with religion, with, racism, with sex wars, with all of these different types of divisive tactics, it's really getting into the spiritual warfare now. We're really seeing like these groups of people that were once unified starting to be infiltrated, and trolls coming in trying to get people to divide. There was several groups that I am still part of, but were very, very strong, that got kind of disbanded over a lot of this stuff, because people get so caught up in their own stuff. And like you said, like, we can often, the people that are mirroring what we've gone through are the ones that we can connect to the most. We can really glean so much off of other people's experiences, and understand that we're not alone in this. Other people are going through this stuff too, and we all have like tools on how we went through it. And that's, I share a lot of that within my book, of like my ascension process and different tools that I used that may be able to help other people, and they may not, but they may. And there's other people that I've gleaned information, even like you and my guests, every one of my guests, of course, and most people that I've interacted with in this world, I've able to find some kind of lesson. And when we are able to do that, we find the gratitude, we find the unity. And that's really what it's about. And I really love to, leave off on that, because that's what our whole conversation is. The sum of it all is unity, connecting that circle, healing the mending the sacred hoop, is what my ancestral heritage of the Lakota people really, really speak about right now, is mending that sacred hoop. And it's the time. We are the thread, and we are the weavers, and it's really a beautiful time to be alive. And you have spilled the tea all over the place today. The truth is out, my friend, and I really appreciate all the time and all the love that you've poured into this conversation.
Thank you.
Just such an amazing DNA activation for me, for all the viewers, and I'm really excited to share this, and just really, really appreciate your time and energy today.
Thank you, Harmony. I feel the same about you. You're amazing. I love everything that you shared and such great insight. So I would love to have you on my show actually sometime soon too.
Oh, that would be fun.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Cheers to that and look forward to it. Like I said, you've spilled the tea all over the place. And if you want to connect with Neil Guar, how do we get a hold of you?
Yes. Well, I always say the best thing to do is just search Portal to Ascension and add everything. But if you want to be more direct, go to portaltoascension.org, sign up there. Everybody that signs up gets around 3,000 hours of free presentations on like every topic under the sun. And it's by category speaker, so it's really well organized. So portaltoascension.org, you can check out our upcoming events there. We have a 2-day conference coming up in a couple of weeks on hybrids, the hybrid program. We have a sacred site ceremony conference coming up. So many, many amazing events and we have a lot of fun at them too.
Oh, so exciting and so much truth that you have to share, and so much amazing conscious expansion and exploration. It's just totally up my avenue. And I know that it's up so many people's avenue, and more every day. People are awakening. And this is a tool that you guys can use. Like you said, there is so much information, there are so many tools. So check it out at Portal to Ascension, and connect with this information, connect with the community, and build that unity, because that's what it's all about. Subscribe to this channel on Wildcraft Wellness and share it with your friends on social media. If you have any comments or questions, stick them down in the comments box below. And definitely stay tuned for the next tea time. Hit the notifications button down below to be updated on all of our newest videos, and connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Harmony Lorraine Fronterhouse, and you can also find me on wildcraftwellness.net. Check out our Etsy products. I have a lot of my homemade awesome herbal products and crystal infused tie-dyes, all sorts of great stuff on my Etsy, and you can get my book there as well, or you can find it on amazon.com and get a copy. If you want an inscribed copy, go to Etsy and I'll send you an inscribed copy. This is my book, and I am super loving to share it with everyone. So check it out. And yeah, cheers to that. Cheers to you, Neil, and all of the
Thank you.
projects that you're doing and all of the love you pour upon this world.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
you.
for joining me on Tea Time. Hello, everyone. Harmony here, and I am excited to share with you my new book, Birthing a New Paradigm. This book is a life of love poured into the pages of an amazing read. It's a transformational book that helps you to unlock your greatest potential. Are you interested in health and wealth? Well, this is the book for you. This is a part autobiographical, part instruction manual on how to embrace your journey here, learn the lessons that are made for you, and to transform and transmute all the things here into gold, and to take the lead and turn it into gold, turning this new world into a new paradigm. And that's why it's called Birthing a New Paradigm. This book is my story on my awakening process and the transformational journey that I took along the way, becoming a mother and learning all of the amazing things that I share with you in this book. So get your copy today. You can find it on Amazon, and you can also check it out, get a copy on my website at wildcraftwellness.net. And if you want, you can also find it on Etsy. My Etsy page, you will get a chance to have an inscribed copy. So order from me, get an inscribed copy on Etsy under Wildcraft Wellness, or you can find it on Amazon and share them with your friends. So I hope you enjoy this read. As like I said, this is my life love poured into the pages here, and I'm super excited to share it with you. Blessings, everyone.